Thank you, my brother. Appreciate it. Am I on? Did I turn my microphone on? Can you hear me? That was the lamest response. How's everybody doing? It's a good thing this isn't a comedy show. I'd already be booed off the stage by now. No, I'm glad to be here. And I was kind of hoping when Tom first got up here, you were like a silhouette because of this glorious, I just need this in my house now. Like that is just, can you imagine movie nights? That would just be great. One time I was fasting and we were doing a 21-day fast and just no food. And I got this idea and my son was doing it with me and my wife and son were doing it. He was only like 12 or something. So we were kind of giving him some sort of a little break on stuff, but he was still fasting with us. And so I thought it would be great to watch Polar Express on like an 8-foot wide screen in my living room. So I break it out. We watch Polar Express on an 8-foot wide screen for Christmas, and it was just wonderful, right? So then I was like, kind of like this. Figured out how to hook my TV up to it. I was watching TV on my 8-foot screen, and my wife's like, when do I get my living room back, you know? And all of a sudden, I'm fasting, and here comes a Burger King commercial with a burger. And it's like 8 feet wide, and like the grease drips coming out of the meat are like 3 inches each, you know? And I'm like, I'm already like hungry. Man, I was praying, I was like, God, you're gonna have to get me through this. That's an 8-foot cheeseburger in front of me right there with 3-inch grease drops coming down. So anyways, I was hoping that the lights wouldn't turn on because now I have to explain myself. I normally don't look this gangster with this nice scratch across my face, but you're not gonna believe the beast that I ran into right before I left. I mean, this thing was like a bear mixed with a lion mixed with a tiger. Oh my. But this thing was just a beast. I actually was able to capture a picture of this beast, and you're not going to believe what you see when you see this beast. Yep. That's my wait, can you take a picture of me in front of that? My wife is addicted to this dog, and she's going to be like, there's like an 18-foot Zane head behind you here. That's going to be funny. This is totally free. This was not part of the original program. All right. But no, she's like, can you hold him while I cut his nails? And I'm like, sure. So man, I mean, it's a little Boston Terrier, right? It's a little puppy. And I'm like bear hugging this thing. And it's just like, no, you're not doing my back feet. And all of a sudden I'm winning and we're getting somewhere. And then all of a sudden, whoosh. And I mean, just like Edward Scissorhands comes across my face, and I'm like, oh, that's going to leave a mark. And sure enough, I did this, and I was bleeding everywhere. I was like, oh, man, I got to go do Easter morning service up at a nice conventional Baptist church. They're going to be like, what is this thug you brought in here, man? And then my daughter-in-law, she's the one that had this picture of his eyes, like he's like, which way to go, which way, you know, he don't know which way he's looking. So I was like, hey, can you send me that one picture where his eyes are just really all like naggly? And so she goes, well, what are you doing with it? I said, well, I'm going to have to explain the scar on my face to this church, and I want to tell a funny story about the beast who did this to me. So she puts a gold chain around his neck. She's like, he needs to be more thug then if you're going to do that. So anyways.
Now, lots of people say that there's no evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ, so all I'm going to do here is provide one line of evidence. It's unfortunate, but I just don't have the time to mention something like the half-dozen facts developed by resurrection expert Gary Habermas, for instance. Minimal facts that even skeptics, atheists, and liberal scholars agree on. These facts are as follows. 1, that Jesus died by crucifixion. 2, that very soon afterwards, his followers had real experiences that they thought were actual appearances of the risen Jesus. 3, that their lives were transformed as a result, even to the point of being willing to die specifically for their faith in the resurrection message. 4, that these things were taught very early, soon after the crucifixion. 5, that James, Jesus' unbelieving brother, became a Christian due to his own experience that he thought was the resurrected Christ. And 6, that the Christian persecutor Paul, formerly Saul of Tarsus, also became a believer after a similar experience. Man, I wish I had the time to mention those, but I just don't. No time, good sir. No time at all. I just don't have time to bring up what former atheist and law-trained journalist Lee Strobel said when he said, I figured it would be easy to disprove the resurrection. Give me a weekend and I can shred Christianity's central claim. Well, it wasn't that easy. After investigating the historical evidence, Mr. Strobel believed in the resurrection of Jesus. Watch the movie, read the books. Bummer I couldn't mention that to you. Ain't got time for this quote either. My job is to infer what is most reasonable from the list of evidences, said cold case detective J. Warner Wallace. After digging into the evidence, I was convinced that what the Bible claims about the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus is the best explanation. The only weakness in the case, and there are always weaknesses, was my own bias against resurrections. Now, since I don't have time to mention such things, let me just get right to my point, okay? My one and only line of evidence has to do with the appearances of Jesus after his death. This is recorded in an early creed cited by the aforementioned Paul the Apostle, which we find in his letter to the Corinthian church. For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12. Then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles, and last of all, he appeared also to me. Okay, there's a lot of people who saw Jesus after he was crucified and buried. And this is exactly why Paul was so confident to stand in front of Festus and King Agrippa and tell them the truth. It's in Acts 25 and 26. Here's a snippet. Paul says, I stand here testifying, saying nothing but what the prophets and Moses said would come to pass, that the Christ must suffer, and that by being the first to rise from the dead, he would proclaim light both to our people and to the Gentiles. Now Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, your great learning is driving you out of your mind. Not sure if that was his actual accent, but Paul said, I am not out of my mind, most excellent Festus. I am speaking true and rational words, for the king knows about these things. None of these things has escaped his notice, for this has not been done in a corner. In other words, all this was falsifiable. Everyone around town was talking about Jesus' resurrection. People had seen him. The tomb was empty. The stone was rolled away. The guards were perplexed. The religious leaders were mystified, trying to create a lie about what happened to the body. Paul, who was persecuting Christians earlier, was now one of them preaching the resurrection of Christ. None of this was hidden. It was all out in the open. So, my eclectic, evidence-eager evangelist, each ecstatically expecting an extraordinary ending, I leave thee with this, from Clive Staples Lewis. This is the story. What are we to make of Christ? There is no question of what we can make of him. It is entirely a question of what he intends to make of us. You must accept or reject the story. But what you can't do is glibly claim or irresponsibly assert that there is no evidence for the resurrection of Jesus, because that, my friends, has been debunked. Adios.
All right. Y'all like that video? Would you show that video to a friend? Would you share that with a friend? Maybe have some doubts? Wow. Did you really do the cord management while I was gone? You really are incredible. That's just, I was like, wow. I have ADD, so you have to keep up if I haven't already told you that. So if I gave you a free app that had 21 of those videos, and we're making more, we've got 2 more that'll be done in a little while, would you download the app if it were free? Yes. Go to Reasons for Hope. You can type in R4H, because it's one of the most downloaded apps now. You can go to R4H and just look for a black background with a blue asterisk. That whole thing is up there. We've got the latest one we just did was on CRT, is biblical, debunked. And what we're doing is we're taking these great concepts and we're debunking these great concepts. The one that's one of my favorites, there's nothing wrong with abortion, debunked. And so all of these are done fast-paced. We spend a lot of money putting these things together because we realize the generation that we're going after. Man, you guys, the college kids and high school kids, you were like 2 working an iPad, like that's, and I'm like, man, how do they work an iPad at 2 years old? And now it's like 6 months old. Your baby's like 2 months away from now, and she's working on an iPad, So your generation is so quick, fast-paced and stuff. So we put these things together. There's also full-length talks. There's new stuff going up almost daily. Reasons for Hope, go download it. It's a free app. Our entire objective is to get the information to you so you will use it. And so if you're out with a conversation, you don't know how to start a conversation, or somebody says, oh, there's nothing wrong with abortion, pull out that video, play it, watch it together, and then you've got a discussion point that you've got that should make it easier because of the way that we tackle it. So the Shroud of Turin, how many have heard of it before? How many have heard this talk before that I've given? Okay, good. And only a few of you. I was like, why are you here if it's the second time around? Was it that interesting the first time? I'd hope so. Reason for Hope is the ministry that I'm with now, and I'm able to travel around and talk about the Shroud of Turin to people who have never heard of it before. And we were kind of discussing beforehand, like, well, how come they haven't found out about this? Like, why isn't it out there more? I don't know if you've noticed, but the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. has an entire floor dedicated to the Shroud of Turin, so it's starting to get more information. How many have heard of the Shroud of Turin? How many know anything about the Shroud of Turin? A little bit? What are some of the things you know? I'm always curious about this. Shout it out. Nothing. Wow, you're going to learn a lot today. DNA evidence on it. Who else? Some of you had your hand up. It's what? It's old. How many have heard of the carbon dating evidence? How many have rejected it because of the carbon dating evidence? Nobody? All right. Well, this is an easy crowd. What's that? I remember the nun sewing it. That's about it. That's all you remember from my last talk? Yeah, that's about it. That's terrible. Maybe I should do a better job of communicating it. All you remember is the nun sewing it? You don't remember the end of it, man? The end of it's like where it's at.
It's just so funny, the nun sewing it.
Oh. So what exactly is the shroud? The shroud is the proposed burial cloth that Jesus was put in when they took him down off the grave. Because remember, he was put into a borrowed tomb, borrowed for 3 days, so he was never properly buried. When they put him into the tomb, they put him inside of this cloth that's about 14 foot long, about 4 foot wide, and they would have put it down, put him in it, and then folded it back over, and so you get this kind of a Jesus burrito type effect that's going on here. But I want to explain to you, thank you for laughing. Most people are like, can I laugh at that? Is that blasphemy? That's not blasphemy. If Jesus doesn't have a sense of humor, I'm done for, man. Like, I think God invented the sense of humor. But I want to show you a quick video that's going to help explain what we're looking at, because otherwise you look at the shroud and you're like, I don't understand what all this is.
1532, Chambéry Cathedral, France. For its safekeeping, the Savoy family puts the shroud in a casket and hides it in a crypt behind a grille with 4 locks, each with a separate key. But on December 15th, a fire blazes through the cathedral. Clergymen frantically search for the 4 keys, but to no avail. Finally, a blacksmith is summoned and manages to free the shroud, but not before the metal casket has started to melt and drip on the folded cloth inside, scarring it forever with burn holes and scorch lines down both sides of the image.
So when you're looking at the shroud, you're seeing this 14-foot long cloth, and you're noticing things like the patterns right here. This is the part he remembered. You see those patterns? They kind of have like a symmetry to them. And the reason for that is because when it was folded again, now when the reliquary box started to melt during the 1532 fire, its silver's dropping down and dropping through the cloth and burning the cloth. So what the nuns did was they decided, if back in the day when you got the old timers will remember this, when I got a hole in my knee, my mom would put this big giant patch over it to stop the hole from tearing anymore, and it was like this big plaid awkward patch, and it was like, no mom, not the patch. It was just huge, and I don't know why they couldn't make them smaller, because they took up like half your leg. So anyways, with the nuns, to keep the patch from getting the hole from getting worse, actually took, and you can go out there and see it on that replica. What's out there is one of 5 in the world that the 1978 team created, and I was fortunate enough to pick one up. It's as close as you're going to get to seeing the shroud up close in person, and I'm going to share some stuff with you. It's really cool to do. But you can actually see the thread count going around each one of the patches, and what they were doing is trying to get it. They also sewed on the back of the cloth a giant piece, a 14-foot long by 4 foot long wide piece of fabric, to give it some more rigidity, so that way when it was stored or when they were taking it out to display it, it had a little bit more thickness to it rather than just that. But the reason why it has that symmetry is it's kind of like that paper angel. When you fold up the paper, you make the cuts and you unfold it, you have symmetrical patterns. So that's why you kind of get that symmetry. Then we can see blood stains on his hands. You can see blood stains on the back. There's water stains. So we have scorch marks, burn marks, water, blood. There's all this stuff. But what a lot of people don't understand is this image of a man. I wish my pointer would pick up on that LED. It does on the black part. But you see the face right here? Oh, I can walk right up to this, couldn't I? This is cool. I've never been able to do this before. You can see the face here, arms coming down, crossed over right here, going down. And you see the back of the head here coming down. There's the small of the back right there, and then going down the knee pits right there. So you can see that there's this image that's on the cloth that's not a part of a burn or a watermark or a scorch mark or anything like that. So we're going to tackle what that is, because that's the biggest question. But before I go on, I need to debunk the medieval forgery theory, because that's probably if I run into people who have heard of the shroud, they're like, it's a medieval forgery, I'm going home. And I'm like, well, let's paint the picture of what technology was back in the medieval times. 1220 was the invention of the treadwheel crane. Now, this is a glorified hamster wheel that a human would get into and run in the hamster wheel, and it would raise up a crane when it lifted up a rope. That was the technology in 1220. Pretty advanced, isn't it? How about this one? 1280, spectacles. Tom, the next time you're like missing your glasses, say, "Have anybody seen my spectacles?" Because that's what glasses were originally called. So 1280, we finally get blind people who can see. I need glasses myself pretty badly. 1498, the bristle toothbrush was invented. How do you think they brushed their teeth before that? Anybody? That's what I said. Don't use your finger, I guess. Just wipe it off. So the bristle toothbrush was comprised of bone and the back of hog hairs. Mom, don't make me brush my teeth again. I want you to understand, 1200 to 1400, man, we've got a human hamster wheel, spectacles, and a hog hair toothbrush. You understand where I'm talking about how technology is advanced at this point. So now that I'm going to go forward with what is the image, and I want you to keep in mind, technology is like way down here. What I'm about to share with you are just a few. This could go on for 2 months, the topic. That's why the Washington Museum has dedicated an entire floor to it. I'm only going to share 4 anomalies with you that are all peer-reviewed. And the reason why this is so important is because you're going to hear me talk about a guy named Barry Schwartz a good bit. He was one of the photographers on the 1978 team that went and spent 5 days and 5 nights. He convicted me in my talk that I should take certain things out, like the Pontius Pilate coin that's over the eyeball. There's just certain things that he's like, those are cool, I love them, but I'm not going to spend any time on them because they haven't been peer-reviewed by the scientific community, which means everything I'm about to tell you about the Shroud, the scientific anomalies, has gone published. They've rebutted until all of a sudden everybody goes, okay, we've landed on this. This is peer-reviewed. We accept this as fact. And so everything I'm going to share with you is that. So just to kind of put the nail in the coffin with the carbon dating theory, it was done in 1988, and Ray Rogers actually wrote a paper called the Thermochemical Acta. Ray Rogers was one of the scientists that was on the 78 team, and he wrote a paper called the Thermochemical Acta unpacking why this is rendered inadmissible. He says, in 1988, 1260 and 1390 with 95% confidence prompted the questions of it, but I want to focus on this part. Observations prove that the radiocarbon sample was not part of the original cloth of the Shroud of Turin. The radiocarbon date was thus not valid for determining the true age of the cloth. So here's what happens. Not only do you have those patches that the nuns sewed in there, it was over in Liry, France, where the Savoy family had ownership of it, and the Savoy family was also doing restoration on it. They just did a massive cleaning, and I think they used Scotch Guard, or a special type of Scotch Guard, about 5 years ago to help preserve the image that's on the cloth. It's still being worked on to this day to preserve the image because the image keeps getting lighter as years go on. And so when it's in France, the French have something that's called an invisible weave, and I want to show you what that looks like.
Got holes in your clothes? You need Without a Trace. We're reweavers. We have a specialized skill. We repair holes and tears in damaged garments. Reweaving is so detailed, this video had to be shown in fast forward. At this speed, you can see the expert weaving of thread strands into your garment's damaged area, creating virtually almost invisible repairs.
So I'm speeding it up even more. They've already sped it up. I'm speeding it up even more, and you can keep watching as I'm talking. It's the coolest thing that they'll go past the hole and bring the threads over here past the hole, and they'll come back past the hole to the point where by the time they're done, to the visible eye, you cannot see that there's a patch there. They match the thread coloration, everything. It's an incredible process that they're known for. The Shroud has invisible French weaves all over it. So when they took that testing and they put it into a lab, they had mixed results because they had mixed fibers. They did have some fibers from the 13th, 12th century, somewhere around there, because the nuns had done these patches in there, but they also had fibers that were going back to the 1st century. And so that's why it's been rendered inadmissible. But just to put the final nail in the coffin, here's what they had to say about it.
The original carbon-14 test was performed in 3 parts by 3 separate laboratories that each tested on an 8-centimeter piece cut from the shroud. The discrepancy came when all 3 laboratories reported different results. Scientists don't consider carbon-14 dating a perfect science, and when used, it's usually tested against other methods. But it was a small detail that gave way to a discrepancy that evidently all 3 labs knew about.
Gli stessi laboratori che hanno fatto questo.
These same laboratories have had faulty results in the past. They said the tablecloth of one of the scientist's mother-in-laws was 300 years old, or that the bones of a mummy from Ibis dated from 1500 years before Christ, and the cloth on her body from 200 years after Christ.
Scientists don't care about accurate truth. You heard what he said. They all knew that the discrepancies were there, but what got published was, oh, it's a medieval forgery. This has been the most scrutinized ancient artifact in all history. There's never been another ancient artifact that has been as scrutinized and tested as much as the Shroud of Turin is, because the 1978 STURP team, they were going out there to shut it down. I'm going to put it in my presentation. He showed us an article literally 15 minutes before we got started. This gentleman has offered $1 million reward to anybody who can recreate the Shroud if it's a fraud. You should be able to recreate it if it's a fraud, and he's offered $1 million reward to anybody who can do it. That was cool, man. Tom, the timing on that one was just like, wow, that's incredible. So what I'm about to show you is what I think the best explanation for it, and you can believe for yourself, because the Shroud what I base my belief in the resurrection is all that information that was in that video. All the historicity that's behind the resurrection is so strong. There's so much evidence to substantiate the resurrection. That's what I submit my belief in the resurrection on, is that historical fact. However, the Shroud's just a really cool, interesting part that I'll share with you what I think it might be at the end. The history of the Shroud, where was it? Because before it was in the Turin Cathedral, it wasn't called the Shroud of Turin. It didn't have it. It was kind of like if you've ever done a study on where were the Israelites in Egypt, and they were there for 400 years, we should be able to find evidence for the Jewish people in Israel. And I did this for months. I was like, I'm digging up nothing. They were there 400 years, and I can't find a shred of evidence for the Jewish people. That's because they weren't called Jewish people or Israelites until after the Exodus. So if you're looking for Jewish people, you're looking for the wrong name. You got to look for Habiru. If you look for the Habiru, you're going to find the Habiru people coming out of Egypt at the same time as what we think the Exodus was. It was amazing as soon as I changed the name. So where was it before it was in Turin? This is a threefold theory that was put forth, and it's not really a theory because of the way that it's still stored to this day. If you fold the cloth in half once, you end up with just the torso, or the full body image. Fold it again, you end up with a torso. Fold it a third time, you end up with just the face. And then the reason why it's got those scorch marks going all the way down, those two long lines, is because just like a t-shirt, you would turn the shirt, the edges into itself, so all you're displaying is the face. And when it was in the fire, the smoke and the fire ended up scorching those lines going all the way down. So we need to look in history and see, is there something that we can find that is very close to that. This is the city of Edessa, 544 AD, long before 12th, 13th century, medieval times. And the city of Edessa is about to get ransacked and burned down. And so old timers will remember this, because now we got the cloud, and when you take a picture, it goes to the cloud. Still don't know where that cloud is. It's out there somewhere. I'm trusting it because I can access it. But that's how pictures are stored nowadays. Back in the day, if your house was getting robbed or on fire, save the dog, not the cat, your children, and pictures. Nobody threw a cat at me so far. You laughed way too hard at that one. Save your pictures. You can't get the pictures back. Those memories are gone forever. So whatever's hanging above the gate, which looks like a face that is on the cloth, not only did they stop what they were doing to go protect it and get it, an artist found the moment of taking it down so important that he painted a picture of the moment of taking it down before the city's ransacked. That must have been pretty important. If we fast forward just a little bit into the 10th century, again, 200, 300, 400 years before the medieval time, the 10th century Abgaris of Edessa is displaying what looks exactly like to be the image of the Shroud with the face that's on the Shroud, the way he's holding that thing. So this is one of my favorites. So this is the gold Byzantine coin from 693 to 695. And the coin's on the left, the Shroud is on the right. When I take the Shroud and superimpose it over the coin, it's an exact match. I mean, down to the T. Now, my argument's not that, well, because this artist coined a face of Jesus using the Shroud of Turin, that makes it the face of Jesus. I'm not saying that's the face of Jesus. What I'm saying is that's what they believe to be the face of Jesus, enough to create artwork from it. And there's one more I'll share with you. Gary Habermas spends probably 30 minutes on this point, like all these different artifacts or the artwork and coinage. I just breeze through it because I want to get to the cool stuff. But you can talk about the way that artwork has been influenced for years. This is Christ the Pantocrator from 550 AD over at Mount Sinai. The Shroud and the Pantocrator have over 200 points of congruence. And so if you're caught in a gas station and you steal a Coke, and you walk out and you're caught on tape, but the tape's kind of blurry. They can't really make out who it is. Points of congruence, like the length of your nose or the edge of your eye to the edge of your eye or the center of the nose to the edge of your eye, those are all called points of congruence. 20 points of congruence in court would convict you of being guilty of the one who's on that tape, right? This has over 200 points of congruence. It's 10 times convicted of, again, being the influence that inspired the artwork for all those years. So I would say, where was the shroud before it went to Turin? We know where it was in Liège, France for a while, and there's actually some really cool stories that I don't have time to get into that pushes it through Europe and all the way back to Peter going from Jerusalem up into Europe to start to share the gospel, and I believe he probably carried it up there with him. That's how he got there. So, the image on the shroud, what is it? I have no clue. I can tell you what it isn't. Then Tom's like, oh my gosh, why did I bring this guy here? I know you don't believe me, so I'm going to let the experts tell you.
At that point in time, I knew that whatever this was, it wasn't a painting.
Nor is it a drawing, or a photograph, or a scorch mark. So what made the image? After 30 years of intensive analysis, the scientists who examined the shroud still have no idea.
You thought I was just me. You don't even know what he's talking about. Listen, man, scrutinized for 30 years. That's why the guys offered $1 million. They cannot figure out what it is. Now, anybody in here sew? The old school, like, thread the needle sew? No one? No one sew? Okay, I was like, there's got to be somebody in here that sew. Okay, you put your hand up. This is the most frustrating thing about sewing. It's not like the actual process. It's threading the needle, because you got to get it wet, and then you go like this and you line yourself up and like you put it through the hole and you think you're through the hole, so you grab real quick before it falls out, and as you start to pull, half of it stays behind. You're like, no! That's because one single thread is composed of 70 to 120 microfibers. 70 to 120 microfibers on one single thread. Then you have thread that is put together and makes up an actual piece of fabric. The image that the blood, the water, the scorch marks goes all the way through the entire cloth. That picture up on the left, oh, I love this screen. That's usually so small you can't really make out what it is. This is fantastic. Barry was telling me about the moment that they were going to take that piece of fabric off the back that the nuns had sewed on. They wanted to take it off so they could see the other side of the cloth. And he said, I was about to snap a picture. I was like, wait, this is the first time they're going to see it. He ran around the table to get their expressions, because they're looking at it, and look at the look on their face. They're like, the image isn't here. It's on this side of the cloth. It's not on this side of the cloth. The image is on the first 2 microfibers of a single thread. It's virtually a superficial image. It really doesn't exist. It's on the first, not 2 threads. That would be impressive. It's on the first 2 microfibers of one single thread. Well, here's the problem that arises. When we were talking about whether somebody can try and recreate it, there's no paints, no pigments, no oils, dyes, resins, powders, or any other medium that an artist could have used or would have used to make the image of the man that's on the cloth. We know 3M created a very special tape that would be able to stick to the cloth and tear the tape off, pulling particles with it without hurting the cloth. And we found lime on the bottom of the guy's feet that comes only from tombs in Jerusalem. We found pollens, 3 different pollens that grow only in one certain area within Israel. So if it was a medieval European forgery, they would have had to have gone back to the Middle East over into Israel, gotten the limestone, gotten the pollens, went back there, put them on there. But when they get to the image of the man, there's nothing to pull, because it's only on the first 2 microfibers. So, any artists in here? Okay, what's your name? Haley? Haley, I'm going to commission you back in 1300 to create this shroud, and we're going to fool the 21st century people, because we're going to have you paint this image, but you can't use any paints, pigments, oils, dyes, resins, powders, or any other medium to create this. Would you be in? It's just like, no, how would I do that? It gets even worse, because the closer you get to the image, when I just walked up to point it out, it disappeared, which was really cool. That's never happened. I've never been able to walk up to the image that big. It disappears. The closer you get, you can do it out there. When you get this close to it, you can't make out the light-dark differences. You have to stand at least 3, 5, 6 foot back. So now, Haley, I'm going to get you a 1 horsehair brush, because you can't put it on more than 2 microfibers. So just 1 horsehair. You can't use any mediums, and you have to stand back about 6 foot and paint this. Are you in? She's like, how much does the job pay? Because this is starting to get real technical here. So now we're going to dive into the deep end of the pool. The only reason it's the deep end of the pool is because for you youngsters, you have no idea what a photo negative is because, well, again, you take a picture, it's on Snapchat, Instagram, and it's in the cloud, and there you go. That's how a picture's made. Well, back in the day, you remember these things, though, from your parents? Yeah, Uncle Johnny looks real weird when you hold the picture up because it's all distorted because the lights and darks are completely reversed. In the photo process, when it first began, 1898, Segundo Pio takes the first picture of the Shroud. He goes back into his dark room, and you have to take your film and you have to put it under a solution with a red light. The red light's the only thing that won't kill the color on it, and you have to develop it, and all of a sudden, boom, a picture pops out onto this plastic film, and it's called a photo negative. Then from the photo negative, you take the photo negative and you put it into a machine that blasts the light through it and turns it into a positive. So now that we've gotten over that hill, are you picking up what I'm putting down? Because it's about to get very difficult. This is why all you remembered was the nun sewing the cloth, because you're like, what? The only thing that makes this difficult is because you don't understand what a photo negative is. That's positively on the left what the Shroud looks like, okay? That's positively what it looks like. On the right is what it looks like when you take the positive image and turn it into a negative. The negative turns into a positive because the positive is actually a negative. Okay, a little slower this time. That is a positive image that's actually in a negative format, because when you take a picture of the positive image and you bring it into your solution and you turn it into a negative, a positive image of a man pops out, which means the original started off in a negative format. So Haley, it's 1300s. Camera hasn't been invented. There's no way to conceptualize what a negative is. I'm having a hard time with you guys. We're on the other side of this negative thing, and it's still like, I just don't quite get this. Haley, you can't use any paints, pigments, oils, dyes, or any other resins or powders or anything. You got to stand 6 foot back with a single horsehair brush, and you got to do it in a negative format, so that way it fools the 21st century people after the cameras come out. You in? How much you pay? Yeah, but again, these are some of the scientific anomalies. The scientific community will not refute the fact that the image is actually on the first 2 microfibers. They can't refute that. They also can't refute that it's in a negative format, because this is really cool. When you take the whole body and you turn it in, I mean, you can see positively his fingers, his arms. You can see where the nail holes were. And if you'll notice little things like this that I don't have time to, that's what I'm saying, we could be here for a month, but just little things that you notice is that look at the direction the blood's running on his arms. There's dried blood on his arms. Look at the direction it's running. If he's hanging like this on a cross, it would be running down his arms like this. It's just little things like that, but you can see the wounds just everywhere, his entire body. All the light spots that are lit up are all wounds that are all over his body. So now it's starting to get into like the sci-fi mode. Anybody like sci-fi? Yes, now we're going sci-fi mode, okay? So some of these scientists that are at the STURP team work at Los Alamos and all these cool places and stuff like that. One of them's a NASA guy, and so he takes a picture of the Shroud and he puts it into the VP8 analyzer. Well, the VP8 analyzer was designed back in the 60s to like go up, take a picture of Mars or something before we could send a rover up. All we had was a satellite that would take a picture of the surface of Mars and put it into the VP8 analyzer, and the VP8 analyzer would spit out a topographical 3-dimensional picture of what the surface of Mars looked like before we had the rover to go up and see it. So by the time I see what I'm about to show you, and this is coming from The Real Face of Jesus, this is one of the documentaries that I just think nailed it. The rest of them, I didn't nail it. The Real Face of Jesus nailed it from the History Channel. But I'm an expert on the Shroud by this point in time when this crazy little man says the craziest thing. Listen to what he says.
When you look at the Shroud, you have the impression that it's a picture, but it's not a picture at all. It's a database of information.
Okay. The image, remember, is on the first 2 microfibers of a single thread. It's basically a superficial image. How then is the image encrypted with a database of information? That, and again, this is peer-reviewed science. Science cannot refute the fact you put it into a VP8 analyzer and it spits out 3-dimensional images of the man that's in the Shroud. If I put pictures of you in there, the light to dark contrast isn't going to work. It's not going to create the same effect because it's a very special photograph that's used for the VP8 analyzer. So now we've got to take it into the, I'm not even going to pick on you anymore because now it's just getting into the ridiculous part, because now in the medieval times, you're going to have to tell me that somehow or another they had the ability to encrypt 3-dimensional information into, and the whole Shroud doesn't do it. It's only him. It's not the burn marks. It's not the blood. It's not the water. It's only the body that's in the Shroud that has these 3-dimensional qualities. That's pretty sci-fi. I don't care who you are. So the question becomes, what could have discolored the image on the cloth? That's just what could have done it. What I'm about to share with you is probably only about 7 or 8 years old, and it to me, I believe, has to be the best theory that we have, because we just don't know. I keep coming back to that guy offered $1 million, man. I'm so glad you shared that with me right before we got started, because that's to me, that's one of the nails in the coffin with it. It's like, I promise you.
Image formation.
Hold on, I just started talking before I did.
The most popular theory of image formation on the shroud today is that of some form of energy or radiation being transmitted from the body enshrouded in the cloth to the cloth itself.
Is it possible that during the resurrection, Christ's body turned to light, giving off the radiation which imprinted his image on the shroud?
It's not just possible, it's biblical. And here's what I mean by that. Moses comes down off that mountain. They're like, dude, cover up, man. I don't know if dude's a Hebrew word, but I'm pretty sure they said something like that. It was like, cover up. His face was illuminated from the inside out. Not shown on his face. His face was illuminated from the inside out to the point where they were telling him to cover up. What about the Mount of Transfiguration? Jesus is standing on the Mount of Transfiguration, and he's literally illuminated from the inside out as Moses and Elijah looks him over and says, yes, you're the perfect sacrifice. So the best explanation we have is possibly an X-ray of the first second of the resurrection, when God breathed the breath of life back into Christ and he rose from the dead. We have a snapshot or a picture or an X-ray picture of it that does that. And here's part of why they say it. The forgers used to say, hey, the fingers are way too long, or the skeptics used to say, hey, the fingers are way too long. The forger doesn't even know proper anatomy. Well, if you look at your hand, yeah, they look pretty short, but in X-ray, your hand finger bones actually go way back down into here. So again, in the 13th century, they would have had to have thought about the anatomy of a hand. When they did that, they would have also had to thought about the fact that, man, when a Roman crucified victim went to a cross, if you pinch your right there in the center, you're going to feel this nerve goes down into your thumb. You'll feel it's called the median nerve. It runs between the space of death dot, which is between those two bones right there. When they crucified him, they wouldn't have put the spike through here. We all know this by now, because of the fact that it would have just ripped the flesh out. When they crucified him, they put the spike right through here, because that space of death dot would have held the criminal to the cross without tearing the flesh and falling off. So when they put that big spike that's half inch around, goes through the space of death dot, it splits the median nerve in half. When the median nerve splits in half, the thumbs collapse because it loses all control of the thumbs. So the guy in the shroud is sitting there thumbless because of the fact that he was crucified in a Roman technique. But the forger would have had to have thought about things like that. The forger would have had to have thought about the fact that the knee pits don't have any bruises or marks on them, because if he was tied to a whipping post, you can't hit that part of the knee. The one thing that I noticed when I first saw the shroud in person was the fact that all the blood coming out of the side wound was collected along the small of the back. Well, liquid finds the path of least resistance, and all that liquid is collected along the small of the back. It's all these different things, and so I want you to hear what they say about this, and then we're going to start to kind of land this thing.
The Telegraph reports the scientists say the technology that would have been needed to create the marks on the shroud simply was not available in medieval times. They concluded that the exact shade, texture, and depth of the imprints on the cloth could only be produced with the aid of ultraviolet lasers, technology that was clearly not available in medieval times. In case there was any doubt about the preternatural degree of energy needed to make such distinct marks, the report spells it out. This degree of power cannot be reproduced by any normal UV source built to date.
We still don't have the technology to do it. We can send a rover to Mars. We can clone you if you want to. We have that technology. We still don't have the technology to build a machine that could produce the preternatural degree of energy for this radiation event. So could they have done it back when they didn't even have electricity? There's no way. But here's the thing. Could it be a medieval forgery? No. But is it Jesus? That's the question that I was not willing to even address, to be quite honest with you, until the first time I met Gary Habermas, and we're talking, and he goes, oh, that's easy. And I'm thinking, if you don't know who Gary Habermas is, he's by far the world's leading expert on the resurrection. I think in all history, he is the most knowledgeable, except for the apostles who saw him themselves. Gary is the most knowledgeable person on the resurrection that's ever lived. And he said, oh, that's easy. I said, Gary, I know you're Gary Habermas and stuff, but that's kind of a large statement you're trying to make. And he said, no, not really. He said, if you're going to teach on Roman crucifixion in Sunday school or college, you want to teach Roman crucifixion methods, do not use the four Gospels. I said, what do you mean? He goes, we have thousands of written accounts of Roman crucifixion. They loved the whole process of crucifixion so much, they literally documented doing it. And they took like the 39 lashes, the 40 minus 1 that the Jewish people would have. If a Jewish person went into a Roman court and they wanted to apply Jewish law to whatever the punishment was, they would take a 3-strand cord and hit you 13 times. 13 times 3 is 39 lashes. But the Romans took it a step further. Instead of just having leather, they took their thumb, put it down in sand, melted lead, poured the melted lead down into the sand to make a little form, but they put crushed goat skull, glass, and shards of metal. Crushed goat skull is the sharpest bone in any animal. And so they took literally the sharpest objects and put them down into the metal. So now when they're coming down and they're striking, it's not just bruising the flesh, it's ripping the flesh. They were experts at it. And he said, if you want to teach on Roman crucifixion, do not use the gospel accounts, because the gospel accounts are the only one that are unique to Jesus. Out of the thousands of accounts we have on Roman crucifixion, only one account of one person out of thousands of them didn't have broken legs, had a spear wound, and had a crown of thorns. That's the only ones. And so we look at the shroud and we're like, does it have the markings of that? But when they came to him, they found that he was already dead and they did not break his legs. Okay, we know his legs aren't broken because it basically is an x-ray. We can see everything in there, and there's not a break in there. We do know on his nose is broken. His right eye's closed almost completely shut because it was so swollen. And this doesn't violate Scripture about not a bone being broken, because that's cartilage. And that's why when you see a skull, you don't see a nose with it, because the cartilage rotted away. But the legs were not broken, so that was a very unique one. And then we've got the spear wound that's coming off the side, and they even know the size of the spear wound that's gone. There's so much research that's been put into this. And we've got the crown of thorns. You can see the blood mark all along the top of the head, front of the head. And see, I don't think the crown was some dainty little thing like we see in pictures with the little blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus that's got like one scar on him and he's hanging on a cross dying and he's got this pretty little crown. I think it was more like a helmet, like a hat. Because the person who was, the soldier who like drew the short straws, like, you get to go make him a crown of thorns because he is the King of Kings, which is what he's crucified for, King of the Jews. He was like, man, I don't want to go do that. And he just threw together a bush, and then they implanted and pressed into his head that bush, which is why you've got the markings, not just on the sides, but you've got it all along the top as well. So the only account of Roman crucifixion that had non-broken legs, an arrow wound or spear wound, and crown of thorns is on that shroud. It's the only one. And it happens to match it. So that's why when Gary was like, oh, that's easy, I was like, huh? And then he shared that with me. I was like, oh, you got a good point, man. The man on that shroud actually matches the one account that we have. So I'm going to kind of land the plane with this. John went into the tomb and he immediately believed. And the scripture says this in verse 8. Finally, the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside. He saw and believed. Now explain this to me, theologians, because we got a bunch of theologians in here. Verse 9. They still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. What does that mean then? In verse 8, it says he believed. Now, this is Daveology 101. This is not Scripture. This is not theology. This is just Daveology 101. My personal opinion, we all have those, my personal opinion is that John went into the tomb and he sees the body is gone because the cloth is laid flat, and he picks up the cloth looking like, where did it go? And we know the image is getting lighter. It must have been darker 2,000 years ago. And he lifts it up, and there's this image of Jesus like on the cloth. And he's going, what? And something kind of like when Elizabeth saw Mary and John the Baptist leapt in her belly, the Holy Spirit kind of just moved. And I think the Holy Spirit just moved on John in that moment. And he's like, I don't understand what I'm looking at, but boy, something special happened here, because that body had to have come through the cloth. And the reason why we know that, there's no remnants of skin fragments that are on that cloth. We got blood, and I'll cover that in a second, but we've got no skin fragments. That means the body had to go through the cloth, because if it was pulled off of the body, if the scar's there and you stick cloth to it and then you pull a dried wound, it's going to pull that flesh that's around the wound, it's going to pull it with it. The fact there's no flesh on the cloth means his body went straight through that cloth on that moment. And so John went in and believed. But here's the closer. Barry believed the blood. You've heard me mention Barry several times. Barry believed the red blood. And so I'm talking with Barry one time, and we're talking, and here's the thing. Barry's a Jew. Barry doesn't care if you believe the gospel. He's the most sought-after speaker in the world. He doesn't do it much anymore because he's getting older, but he probably gets paid $30,000 to travel to Italy to go speak on the shroud, because he's the world's leading expert at this point, because everybody who's passed away has left all their research with him. He stores it in what's known as Stera Inc. That's his nonprofit, but he's got Shroud.com. And I asked him, I said, Barry, how did you get Shroud.com, man? You had to pay some money for that. He goes, I got it before Al Gore invented the internet. For the older ones, will remember that. So he's got Shroud.com. He speaks on the author. He is convinced it's the shroud of Jesus of Nazareth. He's a Jew. Doesn't care if you're saved or not. So I've got to know. I'm like, why would a Jewish person care this much about something that they don't even care if you believe that Jesus is Messiah or not? He doesn't care if you're saved. Side note, I guess it's getting recorded. Doesn't matter. I think he's a Christian. There's no way he can't be a Christian. Every apologist under the sun has had time with Barry and all shared the gospel. He knows the gospel. I just think his shtick is that he's Jewish and he believes it to be the shroud, so that's his kind of MO, and that keeps him going. But anyway, so I asked him, I said, why would you spend 30 plus years of your life defending the authenticity of the shroud? He goes, the red blood. I said, what do you mean? He goes, man, 1978, me and Alan Adler, another Jewish man that was on the team, a very smart guy, he said, they've got him going 2 by 2 down the hallway to get into this room where the shroud was up on display on this special table that was made. And he goes, we turned the corner, and as soon as we turned the corner, both Alan and I simultaneously said, it's fake. I said, why? And he goes, because the blood was red. He goes, everybody knows blood oxidizes and dries like almost black. It's so dark brown that it's almost black. It doesn't stay red. He said, so next 30 years, all of the science is coming back peer-reviewed. The image is on the first 2 microfibers. It's in a negative format. All this stuff is coming back saying this is a very unique cloth. We have nothing like this in the world. But man, the red blood just was a tripping stone for him. Until finally one day he said, I'm driving down the road, and Alan Adler calls me, and he says, Barry, what are you doing? He says, I'm driving. He goes, well, pull over. He's like, okay. So he pulled over. He goes, what is it, man? He goes, I know why the blood is red. And Barry was like, man, I saw 30 years of my life just go flash before my face, because he's like, what do you mean, man? So Alan went to do some research with a body farm, and you can donate your body to science when you die. I would suggest being an organ donor. You don't need them anymore. I'm an organ donor. Don't take them with you. But you can go even a step further and donate your entire corpse to science, and they'll take and put the body under a tree or in the trunk of a car or in bed or in a tub. And what they'll do is they'll analyze how the body's decomposing. And the reason for this is, if their observations are going and they're documenting it hour by hour, they can now, when a detective finds a body laying under a tree or in a tub or in a bed or something, they can do reverse forensics and say this person's been here for 2 weeks, 2 days, and 5 minutes, and they can go back 2 weeks, 2 days, and 5 minutes and say who was with that person, and they solved the crime. So it's a very important study, but here's what they found. Mutilated, gruesome, terrible, atrocious, horrendous victims who have lost more blood in whatever car accident or murder, whatever it was, when they lost more blood than what their body could produce, because your body's awesome, it's always trying to heal itself, but your body's trying to produce blood and can't produce enough, which is why you can't go to the thing and do a blood donor and give it all away. You got to give it a little bit and then give some time for it to make some more. What happens when scientifically that they found is when a body is so badly mutilated that when the person dies, what's actually coming out of their wounds isn't exactly blood anymore. It's a substance known as bilirubin. Bilirubin is extracted out of the liver, pumped up through the veins, trying to give your body something to sustain it, because the blood is the life source to the flesh. And so when the victims that were totally mutilated or just really, really, really suffering hurt died, what was being left out onto the bed that the person was laying on, when it dried in rusty color, because bilirubin is really high in iron. And when iron hits the air and oxidizes, it turns into a reddish brown color. And so 2-day-old, 2-month-old, or 2,000-year-old blood still remains a reddish color, because it's not exactly blood anymore. So all of a sudden, it just hit me, man. And I remember the first time I was on the phone with Barry, I was like, I can't believe I'm talking to Barry Schwartz, man. This is great. 4 hours later, I was like, can't believe I'm still talking with Barry Schwartz, man. Once you get him going, he's an old man, lives up in the North Colorado mountains, and once you get him going, man, he's just Shroud. And so I'm talking to him the second time when this happened, though. So I'd already known about that, but he gets to this point, and I was like, Barry, I got to go, man. I got to go. I don't remember how I got him off the phone, and I just sat in my car and wept. And I hate the fact that I've given this talk so many times that it doesn't hit me like it did when I first gave this talk the first 20 times after that moment. I added this to the end of the talk when he told me this. Because, man, Tom, I just sat in that car and I just wept, man. And I wept, and I wept, and I wept because it hit me like a bag of bricks. When he said, "It is finished," I've heard a lot of, you probably heard a sermon yesterday that included "it is finished" in it. And I love that. My favorite one is, your crimes are written down on a piece of paper outside your cell door. And as time goes on, you cross them off until all of your sins have been paid, all of your crimes have been paid. And when you come out, they actually hand it to you, and you said payment in full. And it's written on there, and it is finished. Your time is finished. I love that one. That's a great sermon. Preach it, right? But when Barry told me that about the Billy Rubin, it hit me, because let's just say that's not his shroud. Not his. Just moving on. What he went through remains. Whether that's his shroud or not does not change the fact of what he did on that cross. And see, the Old Testament talks about the blood having to be drained out of the meat to be the sacrifice. It talks about in the Bible where it says blood is the life source to the flesh. And we talk about in our Bible where it says Jesus is man, and God man in the flesh. In order for him to be the perfect sacrifice, he would have had to have bled out the blood, which was the life source to the flesh, God, man in the flesh, being the Old Testament perfect sacrifice, being completely bled out. And when he was hanging on that cross, being completely bled out, and he says, "It is finished," he was literally saying, "God, Father, I'm done. I have bled. Every drop of blood has been paid." Whoo! Man, that hit me like a bag of bricks. Because I'll leave this up there for a second, but that's who Jesus died for. And I conceptually know that's me. I get that, but I don't know who that guy is. I was a 105-pound meth addict when I met the Lord. I had abandoned my family. I was snorting my life away. I was so suicidal that I was afraid that if I tried to jump in front of a truck, I would just fail and be a paraplegic, and people would laugh at me for failing. Or if I tried to overdose on drugs, I would just end up with my stomach pumped in a hospital and be laughed at because I failed at failing again. I was so low in life when this was right before. I don't even know how I found that picture years ago. I was looking through pictures just trying to find something that would represent it, because I kept running into people that were like, "I can't picture you doing meth and all that stuff." I was like, "Oh, you have no idea who I was." And it hit me that day that he hung on that cross, and he didn't stop at the 80% factor or the 90% factor or the 95 or the 98 or the 99. He had to be bled out completely, which happens to match the shroud. He had to bleed out. And he bled out for that guy? When Barry told me that day, it changed my Christian walk. And here's why. How many of you have given him 51% ownership of your life? He went 100%, man. You don't bleed out to be the perfect sacrifice unless you go 100%. And I'm not asking you to give 100% because I don't know that you could. I'm trying my best. I'm trying my hardest. I wasted the first 30 years of my life spitting in his face, mocking him. I was a militant, devout atheist, man. Couldn't stand Christians. Hated you guys. Still hate some of you. No, I'm just kidding. I actually love everybody. There's not a person that I don't love. I do, even enemies. I love people. He saved that. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to give him 1% more each day, trying to hit that 100% mark. But some of you haven't even given him 51%. If you know what I'm talking about, business owners in here, if you have 51%, you have the say in the company. Have you given him 51% yet? Have you given him 40? I mean, I'm thinking a lot of people in here are probably giving him 51% because you're here on a Monday night and you could be doing something else and you took your time to come here. But I just want to challenge you. How much are you giving back? Because, see, I'm never going to be able to pay him back for what he did for me. I'm looking forward to the day that we get to cast our crowns at his feet as a show of, absolute sovereignty to who he is and what he did for me. And he saved me from myself. And now I'm living a life of joy and peace and contentment and gratitude and fruit bearing. And I love the life that he has given me. But are you giving him enough? Are you giving him ownership of your life? Is he just kind of a thing that's there, or have you really sold out to the person of who he is? Because he went 100%, whether that's his or not. Just understanding Old Testament and New Testament scripture, I can tell you he had to have suffered so badly that he was fully bled out, and I can't even imagine what that felt like. And that was for you, no matter where you're at, because if he did it for me, and if you want to get your theology twisted up, Jesus set me free, filled me with the Holy Spirit. I didn't even know who did it. It took me about 2 or 3 weeks to figure out which God did it. And if you want to know more about that, I have a book out there. If you can't afford it, just take it. It's called How, Why, Where. I wrote it from the first person perspective, where it's like a conversation. I share most of my testimony in it, but it also answers how did we get here, why did we here, and where do we go when we die, the 3 biggest questions anyone has to face. It's a book that I would share with your unbelieving friends or your fence riders, because it's got my story mixed in there with a bunch of apologetics. Again, if you can't afford it, just take one. I don't care. I certainly don't make my money off of book sales, I can tell you that much. If I had to rely on book sales, I'd be failed by now. So anyways, that's all I got for you as far as that I could talk about it for 4 months, but I know it's 8:08. I'm not sure what time we're supposed to be done, and we wanted to do some Q&A and stuff like that. So if you want to kind of take that over.
Yeah, so I've got the mic here, so if anybody has any questions for Dave.
It doesn't even have to be Shroud related. You could be Shroud related or whatever related.
Is there any significance to the 3 that appears to be on the forehead? If you look at the up-close version?
For me, no.
Have you heard any?
No, I mean, for me, no. I've heard people try and get real, like, spiritual about it and say it looks like it's a Hebrew symbol for something. I forget what it was. It's the name of God or something like that, like backwards 3 or whatever. But for me, no. It's not scientifically peer reviewed, so it doesn't do. It seems like it's stretching, trying to fit something in that I think it's just blood.
I thought so also. I just wanted to hear what and the other one is somebody, mainly you in your last presentation, might have mentioned that there was some thought that that the cloth could have been the tablecloth at the Last Supper. Have you looked at that?
You know, there's a theory, and it's just a strict theory. What we know about it is it's a first century weave. It's a herringbone weave pattern, putting it back to that exact point in time. And remember, he was taken down real quick. It was like, man, we got to get him down. We got to get him thrown into the tomb. Where are you going to find a piece of fabric? Wasn't cheap. That's why they were gambling over his clothes, because he had a one-piece outfit. And they were like, man, this thing is nice. And so they're gambling over his clothes. It wasn't easy to come by. And where are they going to find a 14-foot by 4-foot piece of cloth that late in the game to put him into the tomb for temporarily? So some people have come up with the theory that it had to have been the tablecloth, could have been the tablecloth that was used at the Last Supper, because they knew where it was. All the apostles were like, well, we know where one is, it's right over there. So, but that's just theoretical. Fun though.
Okay, I have about 50 of these, but I'll stop with one more. So right now, what would be a skeptic? What is the number one thing that they will try to use to debunk the Shroud, or do they have
the carbon dating? That's all they've got.
Even though that's been...
They don't consider it rendered inadmissible. They still say it happened. They got 1290 to 1320, and that's it, 1360 rather, and they leave it at that. If I were standing on a platform debating somebody at a college or something like that, they would know not to bring that up. If they're going to be worth their weight in salt as a debater, they're going to know not to bother bringing that up. But your average person who's out there, man, Alan, I've run into atheists who like, Jesus never existed. I was like, you still believe that? Like, there's so much evidence for his existence, or he was a stolen pagan tradition. I'm like, you still come on, man. Come on, atheists, you got to do better than that. We've moved past these arguments. You're still stuck 50 years ago, man. And that's that. But they're just stuck in an old argument that just. One day I was talking with my brother, he's still an atheist to this day, but he was like, Jesus never existed. So I was just like, I mean, you got to be kidding me. So I presented some evidence to him. He watched a couple of things, and he came out and he goes, yeah, I don't really know where I got that. It must have been something I heard when I was 12 years old and just kind of threw it up there. And I was like, really? That's the value you put on your own life, is you heard something at 12. I mean, we're talking about eternity, whether it's true or not, you know? So of course, I can't pick on him because for 30 years I did the same thing. But
Well, one more. You answered this question for me a couple years ago, and I want to know if the answer is the same.
I hope you're asking what I hope you're asking.
Gary Habermas is the world's leading expert. How convinced is he and you that that is the authentic shroud?
I'm totally convinced. Listen, as soon as somebody can get the $1 million reward and recreate it, I'll give it to you. You can hang it in your man cave or something. I don't know. I'll stop talking about it. Until that can happen, I don't know what else it can be. Like, there's too many anomalies that would have to get satisfied to make it just go away as something. There's nothing like this that exists in the world with any other dead person whatsoever. We have some mummy cross and stuff like that, but we don't have, and why is that burial cloth intact? If it had stayed on a body during decomposition, it would have at least had some rot holes in it, but it's not, it's intact because the body didn't stay there and decompose. We just don't have anything like it. And to answer these scientific anomalies, if you could answer those, then I'm like, okay, it must not be his because my faith doesn't rest in it. I think, somebody asked me what's the reason. That's not the question I was hoping you were going to ask me, but somebody asked me what is the reason for it? What's the point? And I'm like, I don't really know, but my guess is we live in such a non-Christian world right now where everybody's coming down on Christianity. You can be anything in the world, just don't be a Christian, because if you're a Christian, you're a hater. You can do anything. You can believe anything else. I love the fact that everybody's like protesting Disney over their stance, and yet Disney's like selling their TV shows to Saudi Arabia and stuff, where if you're gay, you're thrown off of a building, and I mean, it's such a hypocritical position that Disney's picked on or pulled like that. It's just such a strange time that we live in because you can't be a Christian. If you can be anything else, just don't be a Christian. And I just think the fact that we have the science over the past 50 years, which is when God started to be pulled out of schools and courthouses and stuff like that, over the past 50 years, we've been able to research this with microscopy and different studies trying to figure out what it is. It's just the timing of this coming up, going, hey, look, the Washington's dedicated a whole floor to it. That's how much evidence we've got for it. In a world that's trying to say the resurrection never happened, I just don't find ironic. So I don't know if that's the purpose for it, but for me, it's like the resurrection didn't happen. Oh yeah, first of all, I've got all this historical evidence, and then how do you explain this away? What created this image, this cloth, if it weren't for the fact that the resurrection were true? It to me, it's just a great evidence. It's a snapshot of that first second of the resurrection. It's really cool evidence.
Good stuff.
I'm not going to answer for him because it's being recorded. His answer is on Tuesday, I think it is. Wednesday, I don't. Thursday, I have heart pain or heart gas, whatever. He goes, I think it is. And then Saturday, he just has this really weird answer for it. But he'll answer it. If you get him off stage, he'll answer it.
Good to go?
Yep.
Okay. So, convinced about the carbon dating and all the scientific evidence you were showing, how did he get to France? How did he go from a tomb in Israel to France?
My theory, that it's not my theory, it's me putting pieces together, is John and Peter find the tomb. John grabs it up. Peter ends up with it. Peter went from Israel, Jerusalem, up into Europe, was one of his first missions, as well as Paul, went up into that area, pulled it up into that area around France, and I think it just lived there for a long time. There is great speculation that it ended up back in Jerusalem and that the Knights Templar were actually there defending it because it was the most holy relic that's out there. Because remember, Knights Templar were Catholic. And so there's actually a lot of evidence to support it. I don't include it because I don't think there's enough evidence, but there's a lot of evidence to support the Knights Templar's position in Jerusalem was to protect the Shroud from the Palestinian Arab type things that were going on. What was right before the Arabs? It was the Muslim people that, not Mongolians. I got Mongolians in my head. Poor Mongolians. I'm putting them in a bad spot. It'll come to me in a minute. But that's it. It ended up over in France. I think Peter carried it up there when he went there and found a safe place for it, kind of like the ark. It was like, here, take the ark to a safe place for a little while.
In the Gospels.
Oh, that's so much better.
All four of them mention strips of cloth.
Oh! I wasn't even going to do this. I only do this I just printed these because I carry a sticker book, and when somebody says something really cool, I let them pick a sticker. And so I had these specially printed because I ran out of stickers. I used to have Star Wars stickers. Here, you get the first sticker ever. You're going to laugh when you see them, too. All right. She said the Bible mentions the strips of linen. And I don't include this because most of the time we don't have time for Q&A afterwards. And so I have to leave it out of the talk. But if you'll notice, and you'll see it out there, you see, I can't reach that, it's too tall. On the top, all right, see that lighter piece? Follow all the way down, you'll see a line, all the way down. You go out there, you can actually see it sewed into there. So there's this like 4-inch strip of linen that's sewed all the way down it. Man, I just made myself, I need to work out with Alan because, man, I am out of breath. I just ran down there and ran back. I'm like, anyways, there's 2 theories. One is my favorite. The nuns were OCD that the body image wasn't centered up on the cloth, so they took 4 inches off of this side, sewed it to that side to center the body image up. That one's pretty funny. I like that one. The second theory is those are the strips. When John picked everything up, he picked everything up, including what's known as the sudarium of Oviedo. And the sudarium of Oviedo is a face cloth that would have been placed over the face of Jesus when he first came off the cross, just like we do nowadays. If we don't have something to cover the whole body, cover the face out of respect. They did that way back in the day. The sudarium of Oviedo has blood marks on it that match the blood marks on the shroud perfectly, but there's no image on the sudarium of Oviedo because when they put him into the tomb, put him into the cloth, they would have taken the face cloth and put it off to the side, but then they also took and ripped or cut a 4-inch section of that cloth off that the nuns ended up sewing back on to keep it all together, and that strip went around the face, holding the jaw closed, which is because of rigor mortis. They would tie the wrists together, which is why the man's wrists are like this, because they tied it together and then tied it around the waist to keep his arms from flailing out, and they would tie it around the knees to keep the legs from flailing out. So they rip that shred, they rip it down. There's 3 pieces. You can see them all sewn on there, tying the wrist, the knees, and the jaw together. And so the strips of linen that are mentioned in the Bible are actually a part of the shroud going all the way along that top piece right there. I think it's on the bottom out there because I've got it flipped the other way. But you'll see it sewn into that whole thing. And then the face cloth, that's really unique because that image wasn't on there because they pulled it off. But that's the one where it talked about the face cloth being folded. And if it was, y'all heard this, right? The folded face cloth? Not everybody? Oh, you're going to be blown away by this. Back, well, I guess maybe even still today, if the folded napkin was on the table, that means that the owner's going to return. If they weren't going to return back to the dinner table, they would just plump it and lay it on the table or on the dish, just like women do that all the time. They're like, I'm going to cover my leftovers with my napkin. You know, I was a waiter for a little while. I was like, why do women do it and men don't? It's just a thing. But when they, look, you're laughing because you know it's true. You're like, so when the Bible talks about the folded napkin, that means he's coming back. That's what that meant. When he folded that napkin up and left it off to the side, he's like, Arnold, I'll be back. I don't think he said it that way, but that would be wicked cool if we made a movie that did that.
Any other questions?
What did you remember this time?
So, one question that I had during the talk, and I think I might have answered it, but I'm not sure, is you mentioned how they kind of rushed to get him in the shroud. It was weird to me at first seeing the crown of thorns on his head because you'd think they'd like pop that off.
Mm-hmm.
It would, like, I don't know, you don't want it to get stuck. But it must have been jammed on there.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the question. Was it just like you're in a rush, you don't have time to like rip this thing off and it's probably like really on there?
I wouldn't be surprised if there were still like fragments stuck in his head or something, but no, they wouldn't have carried him with that on there because I have a crown of thorns at home that somebody made in Jerusalem and made it to look like a hat. And there's a very strange barbed vine that grows in Jerusalem area only that has 2 barbs on it, and they're only about yay big, and they are gnarly, man. I don't think the traditional like long stem, that's how you're going to jam that into somebody's head. The stems are going to break. It's not these things that I've got one. I usually carry them with me when I travel, but it's like these gnarly little things that would have just been like little razors that went in. But I don't think it was like attached to his head enough that they were like trying to kick it off or anything. I think they probably just pulled it off of his head. There was no reason to leave it there.
So do you think they took it off before they put the shroud on?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But
I think
don't
they took
you
it off
see
as
on
soon
the
as,
shroud?
what's that? The blood marks,
blood?
the blood marks seeping out of his head are from the crown of thorns.
Oh.
Yeah, it was because of the lacerations that it left.
Okay.
It's now in the Passion of the Christ, when you see that scene and they're taking a stick and pushing it out, I think that's pretty accurate. The Passion of the Christ doesn't even go as far as what I think his beating really was, but I think that was that scene was very accurate, the way that they were, because it was much smaller thorns and they were just cramming it onto his head, but it wasn't like they tied it to it or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, sweet.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Did you kind of put your hand up? Are you just rubbing your nose? All right, I got you.
I have heard people discredit the shroud by saying the traditions of the day would have been wrapping the individual and not laying a cloth directly over them.
Yeah.
Is that accurate or no? And how
Totally accurate.
How would you refute that claim?
It's totally accurate. However, he was never properly buried. That's what the women were coming to do, was to prepare the body with the salves and then wrap him, and they found an empty tomb. He was shoved in there real quick just to get him down off that cross, which is why they just put him in there. There's actually, now that you've asked the question, I can answer this. There's actually a theory about why does the image only have like a two-dimensional straight out? Where are the sides of the body or anything like that? Well, if he's laying on the cloth, obviously that explains the backside. But the front side, wouldn't it have draped down, and when the light emitted, it would have hit these sides? Well, the theory is they went with pounds of myrrh and stuff like that that they were carrying with them, is what the scriptures tell us. And so the theory is they put this cloth down to keep it from sticking to as many of the wounds as possible, because like I said, when it sticks, they're gonna go there to prepare the body, and it's gonna be like stuck to the body. To keep it from doing that, they stretched it and weighted it down on the sides to keep more of like a flat kind of out, because the body's only this wide, the cloth is this wide, so they would have pulled it taut, put those spices that they had carried with them to keep that from doing that, because they knew they were coming back to do it. The plan was to give them a traditional, like when Lazarus was buried and Lazarus comes out and he was wrapped like a mummy. They were about to do that, but they got there and he was like, I'm gone. I don't think he said it that way, but that's fun.
Any other questions?
Did you learn something?
Got one more.
I know that's a lot of information, and I'm not even picking on you for not remembering. I always tell, especially kids, like when I'm teaching youth, I'm like, I'm about to throw so much information about you, I don't expect you to retain it. That's not why I'm doing it. What I'm doing is I'm throwing a bunch of information at you because I want you to know that when a question comes up, there are good, solid answers available. Don't ever let a concern, a question, or a doubt come up that you don't research, because if you spend some time researching it, you're going to see there's solid answers to every single objection that's ever been thrown out.
I'm kind of just curious, are you familiar with the Tomb of Our Lady of Guadalupe? Because it's pretty similar to this.
The who?
Tomb of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
I don't know. I don't even know what you're saying. Taylor Guadalupe? No, I don't know if I've ever heard of that. What is it?
It's an image of the Virgin Mary on the tomb.
Oh, goodness gracious. Did you see the scene in Forrest Gump where he wipes his face and he hands it back to him and it's a smiley face? That's probably about what credit I would give whatever you're talking about. I lived in Conyers, Georgia for a little while, and every month people would come down to see apparitions of the Virgin Mary that would appear. And I mean, people would just come to this town by the thousands, and they would hang out at this lady's house and all this stuff. And it turned out to be, she was putting hallucinogens in the water, and people were all like, ooh. I don't really care for Catholicism much. I don't know if you can tell that or not. Individual Catholics, knock yourself out. If you can find Christ in it, it's just they've put it reminds me of when Jesus said, you're shame on you. You're asking people to carry a load you yourselves can't carry. And Catholicism adds so much to Christianity that it's asking people to carry stuff that they're not meant to carry, man. Christ said, my burden is light. My yoke is easy.
Any other questions? All right, well, again, Dave's table is out there, his books, he's got some t-shirts there. You can follow the website, download the app. Also, there's a Ratio Christi table out there if you're not familiar with what Ratio Christi does.
Yeah, make sure you download the app. There's a ton of information on there.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
No,
Dave.
you don't have to clap.
And if you like events or topics like this, there's a little QR code out on the Ratio Christi table. Feel free to follow us. This is being recorded, so we'll have this up at some point after we get it edited and uploaded. But topics like this all the time, we'll put on there, and so you can follow us, see more events more speakers that we bring to town to talk about this, and just examine all of the evidences that support the Christian worldview. So we appreciate you coming out.
And if you've got college or high school kids, or you are one, and you're not involved with Ratio Christi, I absolutely 1,000% support Ratio Christi. I think it's just an incredible thing that they're doing. I wish it had been done 50 years ago. We might have stopped the bleeding a little bit more. But I fully endorse what they're doing. It's an incredible thing.
Awesome. Well, what he said, and y'all, thanks for coming and have a good evening.